Welcome back to Control the Freak. You'll recall at the end of the last episode, I gave you the 1 to 5 scale that's sometimes used in CBT to use as a tool to gauge where you feel on a particular subject versus how you feel after a control freak gets involved. And it's a tool to gain some objectivity. Today I want to go back to my DDE equation, the demand disproportionate benefit escalation equation. And we're going to use it in much the same way. It's a way of gaining some objectivity when looking at a given scenario. And I think it works just as well, if I say so myself, as the 1 to 5 scale. We're going to use it today on a completely made up scenario. It's just the kind of common scenario you get sometimes where there's confusion in a relationship. Now, this might seem a little bit controversial to start with, and it might seem that I'm suggesting to take some risks with your safety. That's not the case at all. This is all about gaining some objectivity. We're going to look at a scenario, and it's a scenario of relationship between two people where everything's going well up until one event that changes everything, and as a result, the relationship takes a dive. And we're going to look at it from both sides, because remember, with DDE, you have to look at both sides of the equation. The first D, which is demand, is usually a question mark, unless it's an explicit demand. But when you're working with controlling people in a relationship, those explicit demands don't usually come until later on when they've got their feet under the table. So this is a tool for identifying early demands that are kind of implied, so you can see where this is going. We'll apply it to this made-up scenario. I'm going to use the character names Dave and Sara again, and it's not the same Dave and Sara from the last episode. It's just that I'm getting old and those two names are easy for me to remember. In this scenario, Dave and Sara are very happy up until one night where something doesn't go according to plan. And then afterwards, we'll use DDE to examine what's happened and see where the real fault lies. Sara has told Dave that she wants to go out with some girls, a load of friends and a load of work colleagues. She says to Dave, I'd like to have the house to myself for the first couple of hours after work for all the girls to get ready. We're going to go out to a pub, then we're going to go on to a nightclub. And then I'm probably going to stay at some of my friends' houses. Dave is completely fine with this. He's not that bothered. The only thing he says is, can you make sure you don't go to this nightclub? And there's 2 nightclubs in town, one of which has got an awful reputation for drink spiking, violence, and it's also known as a bit of a meat market. In other words, if you go to this nightclub, your intentions are obvious. You go in there to pull. And he'd rather she didn't go to this nightclub. Sara agrees and says, I wasn't going to go to that nightclub anyway. We're definitely going to this other nightclub. On the night in question, Sara gets the girls round, they all have a great time getting ready and they all go out to the pub, as described. One of the girls there has just got out of a controlling relationship that turned out to be pretty abusive. And she's telling the girls of her journey through control. And she tells them how he started with the love bombing and the over-insistence on helping, and that he was doing these things just for her. And how eventually he took away her autonomy until she couldn't make any decisions and he was making explicit demands of her. All of the girls are taking mental notes, but Sara thinks, I'm all right. Me and Dave are really happy. We haven't got any problems. Come the end of the evening in the pub, they all decide to go on to a nightclub, but a couple of the girls want to go to this other nightclub. They're single and they think it'll be a much more exciting night. Although there's some danger with the drink spiking and what have you, they all tell each other they'll all watch each other's drinks and there shouldn't be a problem. But the fact that there's a little bit of danger involved will make it a more exciting night for all of them. Sara's drunk, she's not exactly thinking clearly, and she says, yeah, okay, everybody else wants to go, that's where we'll go. So they go along to this nightclub. Early morning, 1 o'clock, she decides to text Dave to tell him that she loves him. And Dave's awake at this point, and he replies asking her how her night is and how this nightclub is, thinking that she's gone to the nightclub they agreed that she'd go to. And Sara says, change of plans, we're now at this other nightclub. And there's a little bit of a panic for Dave. And he thinks about it and he replies back saying, can I come down at the end of the night and collect you girls and take you home? And Sara kind of laughs it off and says, no, there's no need, we're all right. But Dave's rattled now, he's heard all about this nightclub. So he replies again going, I would really like to come to the nightclub and pick you girls up and take you home, because it gets dangerous around there at kicking out time. Sara replies again, but this time she's a little bit firmer. She says, no, we're all right. I'm a big girl. You don't need to pick me up. Dave replies one more time. And it's at this point, Sara starts to think, I've told you 3 times already. You're starting to sound like my mate's ex-boyfriend. And she says to him, take the hint. The answer's no. I'll see you tomorrow. The next morning, Dave texts her and says, are you okay? Did you get home okay? And Sara's a little bit rattled. She's already told him she's a big girl. She can make her own decisions. So she replies saying, fine. And that's all she says. Over the coming weeks, Sara starts to interrogate some more of Dave's behaviour. She starts looking for hidden signs that she might not have noticed before because her friends told her, you don't always notice the control signs. You've got to look for them. So that's what she starts doing. And as a result, the relationship has started to deteriorate. Let's look at this story now with the DDE equation. And again, we have to look at it from both sides because it's not always clear where the control's coming from. I think it was at the end of the second episode I ever did where I said, I see lots of examples now where people saying he's being controlling, she's being controlling, and that they're correct that there's some control in the scenario, but they're not always correct where that control's coming from, which is why I created the DDE equation. So let's look at both sides and let's start with Dave's input. And we're going to try and ascertain whether or not there was any demand in Dave's behaviour. Well, Dave made himself scarce. He didn't demand that he was there when the girls were getting ready, so there was no demand there. Dave didn't demand to know who she was with, what they were doing. He asked that they didn't go to a certain nightclub. You could argue there's a tiny demand there, but he didn't demand it, he asked it. We're a little bit unsure at this point. If we fast forward to the phone call, did Dave make any demands in that phone call? Well, he started by asking, can I come down and collect you? And Sara said no. And he asked again. In fact, he asked 4 times. That's a bit pushy, isn't it, if somebody's already said no? But Dave says there was something in her text that made it seem like she was more inebriated than she'd ever been before, and he was worried about the drink spiking. So he felt he had to ask again and again until she gave up. Is there a demand here? We're not sure at this point. So to be clear, we move to the disproportionate benefit part of the equation. Was there any disproportionate benefit to Dave in this night's events? Well, it wasn't disproportionately beneficial to Dave to make himself scarce while the girls got ready. He had to go and sit in the pub on the corner for a couple of hours until they'd left. So that wasn't disproportionately beneficial. Was it disproportionately beneficial to Dave that Sara went out at all? Did that suit him? Not really. It didn't really have an effect on him. There was no benefit to him. If we fast forward to the phone call, was there any disproportionate benefit to Dave? You could argue he was trying to get some because he was worried. He was worried about the drink spiking and the violence and the fact that this nightclub had a reputation for being a meat market where you go to link up with other people. So the fact that he pushed it 4 times to make himself feel better because he was worried, you could argue there's a tiny bit of disproportionate benefit if it had gone Dave's way. You could also argue there was disproportionate benefit for Sara, but we'll come to that. We're still unsure at this point. Is the original discussion in the text disproportionately beneficial to Dave? It would have been if it had gone his way, I think. But we're still unsure, so let's move to the escalation part. Did Dave escalate? We can go straight to the phone call for this because there's nothing else to worry about in this story. We've already established that Dave wasn't getting any disproportionate benefit up until the phone call changed things. Did Dave escalate? There's a slight escalation in the fact that Dave pushed it and he asked 4 times to go and pick her up. But that's not really escalation. Escalation would have been if Dave had got in his car, gone down and waited outside the nightclub. It would have been escalation if he'd phoned her and started shouting at her. It would have been escalation if after that night, Dave punished her for going somewhere she wasn't supposed to go. So is there any escalation on Dave's part? No. I think Dave was a bit pushy, pushing 4 times to be able to come and collect her. But given the fact that he said she seemed really inebriated and he felt that she wasn't able to make the best decisions, I can kind of understand it. For me, in this story, there is no escalation, and it means that there wasn't an original demand in Dave's behaviour. And if there was, it was a tiny one. It wasn't going to go anywhere. So let's look at Sara's side of the story and see if there was any escalation. Was there a demand in Sara's behaviour? You could say there was a demand in saying that she wanted the house to herself, but is that really a demand? Is it a harmful demand? I'd argue not really. Dave wasn't bothered about it. Dave just went and sat in the pub. It was just one of those things where you make space and room to accommodate your partner's needs. I don't think that's a demand. Was there a demand in going out at all that night? No. Neither one of them cared about it so much. Sara was excited to go out and Dave didn't care. He just wanted Sara to have fun. There was no demand there. Was there a demand at the point of the phone call? Arguably. There was a demand that Sara got to choose what she was going to do. But she's a grown woman. She was with loads of friends. Yes, she knew that Dave was upset about the fact that she changed venue and she was going to do it no matter what, no matter how he felt. But that's sometimes how relationships work. Sometimes you're going to do things that upset your partner where you could change your plans to accommodate them, but you can't live your life accommodating somebody else's feelings all of the time. She made the decision. She was with a big group of friends and she was absolutely fine. I'm not sure there's any demand in this behaviour at this point. So let's move to disproportionate benefit. Was there any disproportionate benefit to Sara going out that night? I suppose, in a little way, she was going to have more fun than Dave, but Dave didn't care. If we fast forward to the phone call, was there any disproportionate benefit for Sara in making the decision that she was going to do what she wanted to do? Well, yeah, clearly there was, but is that really a bad thing? Sometimes you do what's best for you. And as I say, you can't always accommodate your partner's feelings. That's for them to manage. You do your best and you consider it, but you can't live your life making decisions based on how your partner's going to feel. So I'm not sure there was any disproportionate benefit at this point for Sara. But we have to look at escalation to see whether or not there's any kind of demand involved. Did Sara escalate? Again, we can go straight to the phone call at this point. Did she escalate? There was a slight escalation in the fact that by the end of the text message, she was telling him, that's it, the decision's made, you're not coming to pick me up. She put her foot down right at that point. But if you've had to tell somebody no 4 times, I think it's perfectly understandable that by the end of that conversation, you're putting your foot down and you're getting a little bit firm. I'm not sure we'd call that escalation. In fact, I wouldn't call that escalation. There is escalation the next day, though. Sara has decided that Dave trying to pick her up isn't looking after her. It's for Dave's own benefit. And it's starting to ring bells with the story of what happened to her friend. So Sara is now suspicious. And we know in this story that as a result of the text the night before and the text the next morning, checking to see she's okay, Sara is now suspicious and she's a little bit paranoid about Dave's behaviour. And we know that in the coming weeks after this, she started to interrogate and examine Dave's behaviour, looking for signs that he was about to become controlling. So yes, there was some escalation after the point. I mentioned this story. I was going to save this story for a couple of episodes' time, in fact. But I mentioned this story because not only is it relevant to the last episode where we spoke about the 1 to 5 scale and gaining objectivity when we examine people's behaviour, so it kind of links to that. But also I've been made aware of a Facebook group recently, and it's a Facebook group called Are We Dating the Same Guy? And it was closed down for a little while and then it's come back up, and it was closed down due to all of the doxing involved in it. I say doxing as if I know what this stuff means, but I'm learning this stuff as I go along. The story of this Facebook group is that it began with women sharing details about men they thought were cheating. And they'd share details and sometimes pictures and say, I think this guy's cheating on me. Does anyone else know this guy? And frequently other girls would come up and say, yeah, I'm dating that guy as well. Lots of guys getting caught out on this website for cheating. But it's kind of evolved as far as I can see. I know somebody who's on this Facebook group and they're on it for entertainment purposes. Now, that might sound awful because there are some girls on there who are being cheated on and they are in controlling relationships. And they're not on there to mock those people. They can see these people on there and these people need help. But there's some girls on there that are acting absolutely insane. And I wonder if it's through fear and suspicion. And clearly they've been hurt before as well. So they're very suspicious of men. And there's certain parts of this Facebook group that are just anti-man. And their way of dealing with this anti-man sentiment is that they're escalating beyond reason. A little bit like Sara did, but times 100. For some of these girls, the fact that some men either won't answer their phone after a couple of rings, or they turn their phone off when they go to the pub, or they turn their phone off when they go to work, or that they won't let their girlfriend go through their phone, is justification for some unbelievable escalation. In a lot of cases, these girls are advocating for stalking, they're advocating for doxing, reporting them to their bosses, reporting them to their family. They're talking about putting those little Apple things, I think AirTags, in their bags and following them to find out where they're going. This seems insane to me, and it seems that all objectivity has been lost. First of all, if you're in a relationship with somebody where you feel you need to stalk and AirTag and dox them, you just shouldn't be in that relationship with somebody. But you also can't go through every relationship like some of these girls are, looking for problems where there isn't any, which is what Sara started to do in this story. She had some suspicions and she kind of got clouded by the noise of those suspicions and started looking for problems. And that's what a lot of these girls are doing, and they're doing it relationship after relationship. You can see them keep popping up with a new relationship. I saw one post where a girl listed all of the things she does whenever she gets a new partner. And this page just went on and on and on about checking deleted phones, about checking most contacted, about checking every app. The list was relentless that she would do with every partner. And I argue that that girl, much like Sara in this story, is starting to create a problem where there might not be any. You've got to get back to objectivity. And if you use the 1 to 5 scale from CBT or use the DDE equation that I've just explained here again, they will help you gain the objectivity you need to understand what's really going on. These things work if you set aside suspicion and fear, which a lot of these girls seem to be running on, suspicion and fear. Set those things aside and concentrate on gaining objectivity using the tools that I've described before. Because it strikes me, as I say, a lot of these girls could be about to begin perfectly healthy relationships, and they're doing untold damage to their future and other people's futures just by running on fear and suspicion. Objectivity is going to help you not only with deciding whether or not your partner's the right person for you, but it's also going to help you spot real control freaks. One of the things I noticed that with channels like this and things that we see on the TV and in the news about controlling behaviour is more and more people are aware of it. But I worry that they're misunderstanding the signs and they're becoming a little bit like amateur sleuths. They're not reading between the lines. What they're doing is taking the headlines and saying, that means that. And the DDE tool and the 1 to 5 scale are ways of getting you to read the subtext, to really understand what's going on. So don't just take one simple interaction as a sign that somebody means you harm. Now again, I'm not suggesting you take risks. It's the last thing that I would do. Don't take risks with your personal safety and don't take risks with your emotional safety with people. These tools are there for you to gain the objectivity to have safe, healthy relationships. Don't take any risks. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. Anyway, I hope that's been some use to you. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with the usual, before I go very quickly, like, share and subscribe, please. I always forget to say that. In the meantime, control the freak, not the people. I'll see you next time. Behave.